It's an Ask LOJ edition of Locked On Jazz with the headliners being what about the losing culture that the Jazz might be building? What stars could you add? What is the future of the Jazz and how long does this losing go on? It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, as well as on YouTube. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. And it is a Friday edition, an Ask LOJ edition, so you line up the questions and you drive the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if the first bonus bet hits. All right, what do we got for questions today? If we get to the end of the show, we'll be talking about whether the Jazz can start having a consistent rotation. How long does this tank go on? Why is Will Hardy treat some players' defense differently than other players? I'm not sure I agree with that, but we'll get to that comment. What happens if we don't get Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper? What stars would you add? What stars could we add? And we started off with, are you worried about a losing culture? Now, let me first, before I get into this, say thank you. I did this yesterday on the show, but I did it later. I just think it's great that we're all still together. I really appreciate you taking the time with the show. I appreciate as a Jazz fan that we can win 15 games and you're still tuned into Locked On Jazz. Our numbers are down a little bit from a year ago, but they're not down dramatically. And so I think I'm really just thankful to work for a fan base that cares this much, a fan base that's this committed to the franchise for the journey. And I'm honored that you'll take the time with me. So thank you for still being a part of this community and being a part of Locked On Jazz. All right. I hate to say this. Okay, there's two things that I'll be totally honest about that I hate. One is that in the offseason, if you recall, if you're an everydayer, I did an entire research project on tanking. And I was utterly committed to try to show that it doesn't work. And it's not true. It totally works. If you commit long enough and hard enough to the task, you make the playoffs. I'm with you. It's terrible. But it's the truth. You've got to really commit. You've got to be a bottom 5 team for like 3 or 4 years in a row. And if you do it, you almost always make the playoffs. Even the Washington Wizards, who have not been to like a conference finals or won 50 games since like 1978, they did it. They made the playoffs with Bradley Beal and John Wall. So the first thing that I utterly hate to tell you is that tanking works. It's a way to acquire really good talent if you commit to it for a long period of time and get a playoff team out of it. Do you win a championship? I don't know that I necessarily think, it helps your chances to get one of those players, but you have to have one of those 5 players. I was talking with actually a coach in the NBA the other day. We were sitting on the bench before a game and like, okay, what players can actually win a title? Like, it's so few, right? Like, so few. That you actually, we're going to find out on Shea. Like, I don't know that Shea's game totally translates. We're about to find out, though. So the first thing is I hate to say, which leads to the second thing. This losing culture stuff sounds so good, but it's total bullcrap. Like, the Cleveland Cavaliers couldn't have had a worse losing culture, and then LeBron came back. Right? Oklahoma City couldn't have had a worse losing. Now they're the best record in the NBA. Cleveland had a losing culture after LeBron left, and now they have the best record in the Eastern Conference. Like, it's about talent. There are certain organizations that seem to screw themselves up. that seem to make mistakes, that seem to not do things right. That's not about a losing culture of tanking. That's just about a badly run front office. And we can get into those teams and look at them if you want to. But the truth is, the idea that losing a bunch of games in a season and sitting players and doing all this stuff and that like feels terrible and isn't any fun actually creates a losing culture isn't true. I know, it sucks. It'd be so great if it was true, but it's not. It'd be great if it was true that tanking didn't work also, but it's not. The truth is that tanking works and you don't create a losing culture. You actually just sign and draft players that are good, bring in new players, and you change the culture because you suddenly got good. You might change the coach along the way too in certain circumstances. But Houston, who couldn't have been worse for 3 years there, doesn't seem to be real impacted by losing culture right now. Frankly, Detroit doesn't either. So that's like a myth that I think we like to put out there, that the media throws out there, that fans talk about, that we like to talk about because maybe it makes us like, I don't know, we want to believe in it. I want to believe that's true. It's just not true. And it's too bad that it's not true. But you know what? Like, Brooklyn's not going to be building a losing culture by being 21-41 if they go sign two good players in the free agency because they want to play in Brooklyn. It's just not true. You can have a badly run front office, but that is way different than a losing culture. San Antonio's going to lose every game the rest of the way. They don't have a losing culture. They have Victor. Right? So I hate to tell it, but that's not true. And this is probably also why it's not true. The next question that came in is, what players do you think will be on the roster when the Utah Jazz are good again? At this point, if I had to put money on a player, okay, so I'm going to put money on a player, $100, that says this player is going to be on the Utah Jazz the next time we win 50 games. And if they're not on the roster, I lose my $100. And if they are on the roster, I win my $100 back. I get $200. I would take Walker Kessler, and that's it. I think the odds are below 50% on every other player. That doesn't mean I don't think that they, like, just understand that. Understand exactly what I said. I think the odds are below 50%. If you kind of go back and look at, like, it's hard to tell who those are. Like, Aaron Wiggins is still on the roster for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Lou Dort, undrafted free agent who then became a player. Those guys actually seem to be on the roster as much as anyone else. First of all, I think us winning 50 games is many years away. And maybe I'm going to be ridiculously wrong on this. It's totally possible. We make 2 trades in the offseason. We go win 50 games. In the offseason last year, we acquired Trae Young and Karl Anthony Towns, and we suddenly had the third best offense in the league. We'd win 50 games, and then all the players would still be on the roster. So I could be dead wrong. But if you ask me to start weighing this equation, I really think about this. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm not trying to be like, oh my gosh, Locke said this. No. I'm literally trying to honestly answer the question. But if you tell me, like, when do we next win 50 games, and I put that on one calculus of trying to figure out when that is, and then I start weighing every single one of our players and where they are in their career trajectory of the veterans and to figure out whether I think that matches, okay? So I get under 50% on all of them for that. And then I get to Lowry's right on the edge. I don't have any idea. And then I get to whether I think our rookie players are going to make it as, like, regular rotation NBA, or young players are going to make it as regular rotation players. Like, any player drafted after 11 generally, or 10th and below, are 50-50 propositions whether they're going to be an NBA player or not, an NBA rotation player. So Flip, Collier, Sensabaugh, Keontae, Cody, to me, all 5 of them, kind of as the year started, were 50-50 NBA play, whether they're going to make the NBA as a regular rotation player in the NBA. That's just the reality if you're drafted, non-top 10. And Cody's 10th, but in a not very good draft. So so I'm still probably at a 50-50 number on all of those players, maybe sliding a little bit one way or the other, on just whether they're going to be NBA regular rotation players and make it still. And then I have to add in where they're whether when the Jazz next win 50, so they slide below 50%. I'm not trying to be dramatic. Walker, I'm certain is an NBA player. He's moved out of that list. He's an NBA rotation player. He's a 20 to 32 minute a night center in the NBA. And he can do that for the next 7 years, and they're hard to find. I would guess he's on the roster when we're good again. I was not trying to be dramatic. I was literally being very analytical. I suddenly said it and suddenly realized there's going to be a headline that says, Locke says no one's going to be left. But not very many are, and that's why the losing culture thing actually doesn't hold a lot. All right, I asked listeners what they would do with this roster, what they would do if they were the Jazz front office. Some of them continued to ask questions. Others gave me their thoughts. We'll share those when we continue next on Locked On Jazz. Friday edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. The Murdoch lineup of cars, absolutely amazing. The electric car, the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6. It is so fun to not have to go to a gas station. It is so fun to drive an electric car. If you have not driven an electric car yet, that's why you don't own one. They drive way differently, and they're super fun, and it's really great. And all the award-winning aspects of the 5 and the 6 on the Ioniq. The SUV lineup with the new Santa Fe looks absolutely strikingly fabulous. The Palisade's the biggest one. The Kona's the zippiest one. And we want you to get that experience over at Murdoch Hyundai. So email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. We'll set you up with a VIP meeting over at Murdoch Hyundai to make sure that you get the VIP experience you deserve for being a Locked On everydayer. That's right. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com to get your VIP experience over at Murdoch Hyundai. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA and get $50 instantly when you play. Prize Picks is fun and easy and makes it all the more fun as basketball season heats up. Play daily fantasy sports. Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. You can build lineups. Take Luka, take Steph last night. You would have been rolling. Take Kobe White. You would have been rolling. Quick and easy. Prize Picks makes it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds. And when you win, the money hits your account in little as 15 minutes. No waiting around. Talk a Tuesday deals. Prize Pick discounts select player projections up to 25%, giving even more value to your lineup. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. It's an Ask LOJ edition of Locked On Jazz, where you send in your questions. We answer them. We, being me, myself, and the mouse in my pocket. And we have a good time with it. You guys always ask great questions. We try to do this every Friday because your questions continue to be great. When your questions are no longer great, we'll stop doing it every Friday. It's really simple. We're in Toronto right now. It's awesome. My favorite city of the NBA. And world-class dinner last night. Totally amazing. Love this city. All right. If the Jazz can't get into the top 2 in the draft, I'm trading Lowry to the highest bidder, tanking harder next season. If the Jazz can get Harper and Flag, I'm keeping Lowry and going big game hunting. All right. I love this conversation. We're going to have this conversation time and time again, I think, coming up. Let me start with the first part. I think the first part's really interesting. If we don't get in the top 2 of the draft, what do we do? Because there are beginning to be a feeling this is a 2-person draft. That Harper and Flag are the stars of this draft. And the rest of them are nice players. But that Flag and Harper are the 2 that will be stars. So if we don't get in the top 2, what do you do? There's two total choices there. One is you realize that you're not getting your piece yet, and you do exactly what this person said, which is you trade Lauri Markkanen, you tank harder, and you hope again. The flip side is, wow, we got to wait another year to go get our star. Let's go get Zion Williamson, Trae Young, someone of that sort with our fourth pick and rebuild that way. Use it as a different type asset. It's a wonderful debate. We'll have it multiple times between now and the lottery. I think it's fascinating, and it's worth us just like digging into in the nth degree. The second one is if you get Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper, are you immediately accelerating, or you now know you have your piece and you actually have some patience and you go play Cooper Flagg 35 minutes? I don't think he's LeBron James and gets you to 41 wins your first year. You probably still lose an awful lot. You get another draft pick to go with him, and you're really waiting for Cooper Flagg to be great, which for like Jason Tatum and most players is their fourth or fifth year. And so you're just waiting for it to happen instead of accelerating. Or you now have Cooper Flagg and you go accelerate it. You keep Lowry, you give Cooper Flagg, and you try to bring in this other star. And now you have your pieces and you're just going right away. Another great debate. I don't know entirely where I sit on these things. I don't think I've dug in enough to try to figure it out. The only thing I would say, and this is what I think is the hardest part about this season, and once you've committed to the task, I don't think you're committing to it for a year. That's always been my feeling. Once you've committed to the task, this is a multi-year task. And the complaint that most people have had that has some legitimacy is when you don't really commit to the task. But once you've committed, once you've dove into the cold plunge, you're in it for a whole 3 minutes or 3 years. Like, think about it. This is a cold plunge. It's super uncomfortable. It's supposedly good for you, but you're not really sure. You're diving in. Your body and everything about you tells you want to get out. You decided to do it. And the mental fortitude you have to commit to the cold plunge and stay in it. If you were a GM, would you ever trade for the Lakers pick again with hopes of a future high draft capital, or is it too risky a move given the league just ships stars to them at any moment? You know, what's interesting about this is it certainly feels this way. I would not quibble with you in any way, shape, or form on that. They were terrible for a while. Now, they're not going to be. Things are not going our way in a lot of ways. I could do a big, huge show on how every freaking thing in the world's going against us right now. And it's true, frankly. I mean, just Dallas hitting the skid sucks. Phoenix falling apart sucks for us. We need Minnesota to fail. Minnesota's going to end up with the 6. We need Minnesota to end up being 9 or 10, losing the play-in and get us those lottery odds. They're not. They're going to be the 6th team by the time it's done. Our Laker pick is not going to be very good anymore. I mean, I guess Luka sprains an ankle on a given season. It's fine. That's the gamble. But what's funny about that is I kind of, that like you're making bets, right? We're making a bet that at some point Cleveland along the way might not be good, or we made a bet that Minnesota, and if anything ever goes wrong with those franchises, it's very hard for the rebuild. And you feel like, well, with the Lakers, like you don't want to make the bet. The Lakers had a 4 years run that was as bad as anyone in the league. They won 27, 21, 17, and 26 for a 4-year span that was not 10 years ago. By the way, it doesn't seem to be impacting their losing culture. They won the finals 3 years later because they got LeBron and Anthony Davis. That's like kind of the bullcrap that is losing culture. I hate to tell you. It sucks. I know. I want it to be true too. But it's not. There's all sorts of things in life that I want to have be true, and then you go do the analytical breakdown of it. It's not true. Could adding a star like Zion or Giannis or Booker or LaMelo or someone else be enough to get us one additional move from championship contention? Rebuilding through the draft sounds so hard. So in theory, though I do think the game might be changing a little bit, you need a top 10, a top 20, and a top 50 player in the NBA. Phoenix tried to do it with tried to go get 3 top 10 players. Turns out Bradley Beal's probably not a top 10 player and then have nothing else on their roster. And that's clearly not working. And it's like what is working right now does seem to be some sort of balance. A dominating scorer in Shea and Donovan and some sort of balance across in Garland. There also doesn't seem to be a real collective mechanism by what's working, frankly, from one to the next. If you actually look at, like, Boston's really different than Cleveland, who's really different than Milwaukee, who's really different than Oklahoma City, who's really different than Los Angeles, who's really different than Denver. So I actually don't know if there's a collective model anymore that says, like, it used to be top 10, top 20, top 50. That probably is still true. So if you're adding a star, let's say we somehow got Devin Booker, not possible, they're not trading him, but we got Devin Booker as a top 20 player in the NBA, and then we had Lowry as a top 50 player in the NBA, we'd probably still be short a star. We'd be pretty good. I don't know that move would move us into, would it be good enough to get us one additional move for an NBA contender? Yeah, maybe, but that additional move might have to be like a top 10 player or another top 20 and hope that there's something a little bit different in the model. What undervalued player would you acquire? Such a wide-ranging question, but I have a thought on it, and I'll give it to you next when we continue on Locked on Jazz. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. FanDuel making the NBA even more fun for you every single night. Jump into the action with FanDuel with their live betting on their app every single night. You can do same game parlays. You can do it all with FanDuel. Right now, there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's right, live bets throughout the game. If you miss opening tip, you just want to play attention to the fourth quarter comeback, you can do that. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can do the same game parlays. FanDuel's betting feature keeps every moment exciting. Late game rallies, picking up a player to hit a clutch 3, whatever it might be. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, the new FanDuel customer can get $150 in bonus bets. If your $5 bet wins, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book betting partner of the NBA. David Locke with you. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. LockedOnDaily.com, #1 stop for all things newsletter, NBA. Mike Schraer's article yesterday was absolutely fantastic. He does great work. Katie Heindel today will drop another one for you. It's all great. Make sure you dive in and get your LockedOnDaily.com and sign up for the Locked On Jazz newsletter. Very wide-ranging question, but I have 3 answers. I would trade for Zion Williamson. I would trade for LaMelo Ball. I had a third one I would trade for. I don't know that I would trade for Trae Young unless I could get it. I would have traded for Trae Young and Karl Anthony Towns and been the worst defensive team in the NBA and a top 5 offense player team. Let me say 2 things here. I just am not. I love what Ryan and Danny's belief that they're trying to bring a championship to Utah. I think it's great. I don't think it's possible, if I'm being totally honest. Like, I think there's 5 players in the NBA that can win a championship, and there's 450, 500 players in the NBA, so you have like a 1% chance of getting that player somehow. To me, like, analytically, that's super hard for me to justify. So my answer on this is I don't know that I think that that's really that realistic a possibility for us to be able to pull off on a given in this. So I would far rather try to build a team that is a top 4 or 5 team in the conference and then hope we get hot or something. I also am just a huge believer in talent. And frankly, this might be a terrible idea. But we're not winning games right now to get in draft position to draft a player that has the talent of a Zion Williamson or LaMelo Ball. In the case of Zion, it's unworldly, his talent level. There's all sorts of a million problems, but that's why you can get him. And if it actually works, it works. And when you draft one of these players at 18, I don't know that you have a higher percentage of knowing that that's going to work than you do if you go get Zion, who you know what his problems are. You just don't know the warts of the other kid. LaMelo, I got no idea on. They're losing every night. He puts up huge numbers. He's the number 3 isolation player in the league, but the talent level is just crazy. The way he plays today, I don't think you can win with him. But I don't think you can get talent like that either. Ever. So I would trade for Zion Williamson or LaMelo Ball, and I would take that talent level. And then my theory is, if it clicks, you're in pretty good shape. Those guys mature, they grow up, they get better, you got a star, you have the most difficult thing you could possibly find. And if it doesn't, then you just go through this again. If LaMelo really is just not a winner and such a loser, then fine. At least we're entertaining while we lose with an incredible talent. And we do what Charlotte's doing right now, which just has as good a chance as us getting the top pick of the draft. And if Zion really doesn't like the game and he doesn't want to work and he's that much of a problem, he's all these things, then you just do exactly what we're doing right now. You're minus some assets, fine. You're in the exact same places we are right now, but you end up with one of the elite talents in the world that might work. It's literally what we're trying to do right now is to go through a season to get one of those types of talents. And we have no idea what they're going to be like. We would go bonkers to draft Zion Williamson or LaMelo Ball. And then we would be dealing with them. So let's just deal with them. Does that make any sense? Trae Young to me is really interesting because I think Trae Young's amazing. And I think you're immediately a 45-win team with Trae Young. Though Atlanta's not quite that this year, but they've had so many injuries. Because I just think he's that gifted. I don't know that you can be more than a 52-win team with Trae Young. So I'm a little hesitant on Trae Young. But if you gave me somebody else with Trae Young, like the example I used last year was I would love to have traded for Trae Young and Karl-Anthony Towns. Not one of them, both of them. And then you just roll out Karl-Anthony Towns, Trae Young, Lowry Markkanen, and we win games 134 to 128. And who cares? It's just your differential. And we would be the worst defensive team in the league. We'd just be the top 5 offense team. You automatically win 50 games if you're top 3 or 5 offense team. That's my, hey, I'm just a blowhard play-by-play announcer guy doing a podcast. I there's all sorts of problems with that theory. Like Justin could probably shoot 100 problems with that. I also do think there's something that Oklahoma City did where when Oklahoma City went through these 2 losing seasons, they had a bunch of money on their roster that just didn't play. So like Zion on your roster gets hurt and doesn't play for a season. It's actually good for the quest because it makes it easier to go through the tank. Or the developmental season, whatever you want to call it. If the organization doesn't land what they feel is a superstar, Flagg or Harper, does it mean they're more likely to trade Lowry or continue to? This is the question we're just going to have to talk about a lot. Because it's not clearly defined. Why does Will Hardy punish Bryce Sensabaugh for his lack of defense, but not other young players? Is there something else Hardy doesn't like about him? So he did bench Keontae George for his lack of defense. So I think that is a flaw in the question, would be my kind of quick thought on that. Is I do think that he has benched other players for their lack of defense, namely Keontae George. And I don't know who else is the huge. And I think Kyle Filipowski's been pulled out of some games for his lack of defense so far this year. So I don't think I buy your question on that. Bryce's defense is not good. And he's got to work on it. He's got to figure out anticipation and how to move his feet. Have I seen Coach Hardy develop since he's become the Jazz head coach? Yeah, I think this is a crazy hard job right now. He's always been very good at communicating with players. I think he's continuing to do that. I've seen them do many, many different things. Yeah, I think he's gotten a lot better. We talk a lot about Keontae's defense. What about Collier's? How good is he defensively, and how good could he be? Right now, I don't think he's great. I think he has the potential to be a bulldog defensively because he's got that physical strength and that quickness, and he's probably going to need to be that. Because right now, what he is a tempo setter, good passer, good pace player, and he's going to have to be elite defensively to get time on the floor because his shooting is 25% from three. Fabulous questions across the board. That is Locked on Jazz. Have a great weekend. Ron and I will be with you after the game from Toronto and after the game from Philadelphia. I'll be back with you Monday from Boston. It is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. If you don't follow me on socials, please do. It's DLock09 on all social accounts, TikTok, Snap, wherever else. And if you have not signed up for the newsletter, please do it Locked on Daily. And finally, please sign up, follow the show, subscribe, and be a part of the community. Thank you so much for listening to Locked on Jazz. We now send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA channel on YouTube, Locked on NBA, or on audio. Check out Locked on NBA Game Night, every game, every night.